transparent. And there's a period after the reading that can take time, take hours, days, weeks, for the full impact of the reading to begin to make sense.
And that's why I'm sure you tell your clients to write it down, write notes, right?
Absolutely. Plus, during the reading, you can refer to the notes. And one of my favorite stories, I was doing a reading for this lady, and she was really nice, and her husband had passed. And so, I'm getting all this evidence. And then suddenly I see the 7 dwarfs, and I'm hearing, hi-ho, hi-ho. Okay, so I'm explaining this to her, and of course, she's looking at me like I've got 4 heads. And one of the dwarves walks up to me and sneezes at me, sneezy. So I'm explaining all this, and I go, does that make sense? She goes, no. So I couldn't really get too upset on that one, because how weird is that? But the one thing I'll bet you would agree with, the weirder it is, the more true it tends to be. And so at the end of the reading, she looks at her notes, she goes, oh, dear God. I said, what? She goes, I'm looking back at that 7 dwarfs thing, and now I remember. I said, what? What do you remember? She said, well, about a year before my husband died, at Halloween, she said, a group of our friends, we all went to a costume party dressed up as the 7 dwarfs.
There you go, yes.
Well, it gets even better. And she goes, my husband had asthma, so he was sneezy. and that's the dwarf that came up and sneezed at. She goes, oh my God. She goes, how could you possibly know that? I said, I don't, but your husband does. And so it's things like that. Like when people tell me, they go, oh, well, you're cold reading. Okay, so I was doing a big public event, and this guy stands up with his family, and he goes, well, how do I know that you didn't look me up on the Internet? And his father spirit was communicating, and I said, what's with the lemon meringue pie? And the guy starts freaking out. He goes, oh, my God. He goes, I baked one of those last night. I said, well, was that on the Internet? He goes, no. I said, look, I don't fling out random desserts hoping to get a hit.
Let's tell people that cold readings, for those that don't understand, is when a psychic medium or they just tell it out of the blue. Yeah, right? They tell. But what I'm trying to get at is that when I'm doing readings and when something weird comes to me, I got to be bold. You find it hard to. At first I found it hard a little bit to be bold, but then I just tell it like it is. How did you deal with that?
What I do is I tell them, whatever's transmitted to me, I'm going to tell you what it is. And if it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it, because it might make sense after the reading. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a session for this husband and wife, and her father spirit came through, and I said, I'm seeing a World War I biplane. Does that make sense? No. Are you sure? No. I looked at the husband, or I asked the husband, what about you? No. I said, wow, this is really strong. No. All right, so the next day, I get an email from them, and sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but
it's okay. Said, I know what.
Said, I forgot back in high school, she goes, my father was a pilot, and he owned a World War I biplane. Okay, I don't know how you forget that your father used to own a World War I fighter plane.
Yeah.
Okay? And then the husband wrote something there, and he goes, on our last anniversary, we went for a flight on a replica of a World War I biplane, but we didn't think we should say anything. Okay, why are you coming to me if when I get something right on point, you don't acknowledge it? And this is where a lot of times things go wrong, or I don't want to say go wrong, but get complicated in a reading when the client isn't on board to acknowledge what comes through.
Right.
And if I say World War I biplane and your dad used to own one and fly one, the appropriate answer is yes.
Yes.
Not no or nothing.
I just think people are thinking something else at the time. I think their minds aren't. They expect. I think, and I think you know this. They always expect the reading to be different if they're not open too much, right?
Yeah, I think what they're expecting is for the room to glow and the spirit of their loved one to materialize, and essentially the last scene from the movie Ghost with Whoopi Goldberg and Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze. I think that's what they're expecting. And but on the other hand, I did a reading about a week ago for this woman who was in Qatar, one of the Arab Gulf states, and she contacted me, and she was very upset because her husband had died. And so during the reading, all of a sudden, all the stuff about him came through, and she was very nice and very receptive. And about 3 or 4 days after the reading, she sent me an email, and she was apologizing. And honestly, I didn't think she needed to apologize because she was so nice and polite during the reading. She said, I was so overwhelmed, and she said, all of a sudden it dawned on me, you really were communicating with him, because the things you brought up, the names, the dates, the places, the medical conditions, the things, she goes, what I'm doing in my life, what I'm planning, she goes, there is no way you could possibly know this. And so that, Richard, always makes it worth it when we're able to make connections for somebody who not only gets it, but then they respect the process.
Yes, and those kind of clients, maybe 50%.
Yes,
60%. But you always get those tough ones sometimes, and when you feel like you're under the gun per se, or somebody's trying to test you out, no matter what you're saying is not right, how do you deal with them?
I say, well, I may be misinterpreting this, okay? Or if some people are just so negative, I'm not going to struggle with them. Pretty much 15 minutes into it, if all I get is no, I just terminate the reading.
Yeah, same here. Same, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I try to be polite about it, but there are some people, they just can't get the clues whatsoever. I mean, I was doing a reading for somebody, and his daughter's spirit comes through, and I said, okay, she keeps showing me her left hand, something about the left hand. Does that make sense? No. Are you positive? Is there something about her or her left hand? No. He goes, well, she was left-handed, but no. All right. Then I said, well, now she's talking about your heart. There's some issue with your heart. No. She said there's a major problem or issue with your heart. No, not at all. Are you sure about that? No. I guess she won't let me go. He goes, well, I have an artificial heart valve, but there's nothing wrong with my heart. I mean, it's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, we're talking about that, but you're saying no. It's like, I think it's the terms. They want us to come up with the exact terminology, and it's not there in spirit world sometimes.
Sometimes it's not. I was on a TV show, and if the person I did the reading for is listening, I apologize ahead of time. But this lady stands up. Her husband was sitting next to her, and the spirit of her son came through. And I keep getting cross. And I'm going, okay, cross. Does that make sense? No. I go, it could be like maybe he worked at the Red Cross or in the I'm trying, I'm going through like every interpretation for cross. No. And so we have to go to station break because you know how TV is in 7-minute segments. Yeah. And so we're, it's like, and then there's 4 minutes of commercials. And the husband goes, well, our last name is Cross. I mean, your last name as in your son's last name, too? And the lady's looking at me, she goes, oh, yeah, our last name is Cross. And I'm not even going to say what I heard the TV
because
show host say under her breath, and they got to be nice because I'm in a studio and there's all these people and the whole audience and all that. And we come back on, and so this lady's ready for me to keep doing the reading, and the host goes, so on the station break, you said that your last name was Cross, and the lady goes, yeah. She goes, what else does my son have? I go, I think I'm getting pulled to somebody else because the thing is, I'm not going to, on a TV show where you have such limited time, and I want to get to as many people as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. And I realized she was nervous. It was television. There's cameras. There's lights. I mean, it's nerve-wracking enough for those of us who do this a lot, let alone her. And I didn't want to put her through that anymore, and I just told her, look, it would be better if you would sign up for like a one-on-one reading with me so I've got the time to spend with you, okay? Because if she's so nervous that she can't even acknowledge her name, then it's just going to look really bad on, for her, for me, for the show. And so that's why, that's why, like on these TV shows, you'll be giving people all this information, like, no, and then the camera goes off, the lights go off, and they cry, and they go, that was my mother, and it's like, okay, so you couldn't recognize your mother when the cameras are rolling. But once again, you have to realize that in a public setting, this is very emotional and very stressful for people. Mm-hmm. So that's why when mediums like you and me are on radio and on television, and you get people, and the reading doesn't always appear to go perfectly. Let me ask you this, Richard. You know when you're getting good stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah, the flow is just great. Exactly. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, we know when we're getting good information. The problem is it being acknowledged by the client? Because if you say, I'm getting something in the end part of March, does that make sense? No. Are you sure? Well, he died at the end of March, but no.
Subtle clues. I know. It's right in front of us, and the people still deny it, and it's frustrating. I mean,
it'd be very convenient if what we did was texting and instant messaging, and the spirits would just come through and say, oh, well, this is this, and write it out. And people that like to scoff at what we do are like, well, why don't... I had somebody one time in a public setting say, well, all these symbols and things, why don't they just tell you? It's like, they are just telling us. Spirits don't speak a human language. They don't speak English, French, Mandarin, or Russian. They speak frequency, and they're emitting an electromagnetic pulse, which then interfaces with the electromagnetic field in our brain, and then that gets translated into recognizable concepts based on our memories, feelings, and cultural associations. So if I see a ruby, that could indicate a couple different things. A ruby is the birthstone for the month of July. So that's a trigger for me that it could be a birth, death, anniversary, or event in July. But it could also be the name Julie because of July, or the name Rudy or Ruby. And people say, well, that sounds like you're cold reading because you're just throwing terms out there. Oh, no. Think about, Richard, sounds that we use, like morning. Does that mean M-O-R-N-I-N-G, the time of day, or does it mean M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G? Or the sound there. Is it T-H-E-R-E, E-I-R-E-Y apostrophe R-E? And it's the same thing in frequency transfer from a spirit. They send this image or this data, and our brain is struggling to interpret it. So if I get a ruby, yeah, it could be a piece of jewelry with a ruby in it, but there are other associations attached to it which can apply. Sometimes one of them do, sometimes all of them do.
It varies. It's like when I was doing a reading with somebody, it was about a murder, and I was doing a comedy show at the time. This is the most ridiculous time to be doing this, okay? But here I am on stage. I'm doing my comedy act, right?